So today we are going to dive into the world of writing, especially horror fiction and inspirational writing with everything with the great writer Shawn Jenkins. Shawn, could you please introduce yourself and what you do for business?
Yes, very much.
So please introduce yourself, Shawn.
Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Shawn A. Jenkins. I'm from a place called Columbus, Ohio, here in the United States of America.
That is great. Could you explain a little more about your experience with writing?
Well, let's see. I've been writing now for about 15 years. Um, I always credit my ex-wife for getting me into writing. um, and I say ex, but writing was something that I really didn't think about growing up. But when I met my ex-wife and we started, she was a bit big into writing herself, and I just kind of picked up on it, and it's just something I never left behind. It's something I kept on with, throughout all the rejection letters from publishers. It's just something I just kept on with, and I have a passion for it, you know. I mean, I write when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm mad. It's just, I'm always writing.
Yeah, that is great. So you have written a number of horror fiction novels. How do you describe your experience through writing horror fiction?
Um, you gotta have a wild imagination, have a wild imagination all the while. One thing that I really try to do is with my horror fiction is I try to put it into a realistic, more setting. I know a lot of publishers, a lot of other authors kind of stray away from that, but I always kind of try to visualize how would this situation work in our real world. Just like with the Beast of 77 series or the trilogy. It takes place in 1977, but what I wanted to do was, what if this is a werewolf story? What if this were real? We know it's not, but what if it really were? How would we, the real people, deal with such an ordeal or deal with something like that?
Which was the let's say the biggest novel of this horror novels series? Which would you say was your masterpiece?
The second one, it was called The Curse of 1977.
What happens? Could you explain like the plot of the novel in short, the summary?
Sure. This one takes place about 5 months after the first novel. It's in the summer of 1977, and it's the aftermath of what took place before. Except now, unlike in the first story, now instead of one werewolf, there are two of them, and the two werewolves are terrorizing this fictional city, so to speak. I tell people all the time, I said, it took me exactly 5 months to write this story. I just could not stop writing this story. From January all the way to May, I just wrote nonstop. And by the time May got around, it was like I was completely done. It was crazy.
So my next question is, why are you so mad about the real world? Why do you want to destroy it and bring werewolves terrorizing people in reality, Shawn?
I think that's because it's not that I like terrorizing people, but once again, I like with movies. I like more realistic type horror films, like the found footage type of films. The ones where they're always walking around with the camera and whatnot. I know a lot of people don't like those type of movies. They're shaky and everything, but I like them because the more realistic it is, it seems to. I find it more scary. So that's what I wanted to do with this particular series was, what would happen if this really did occur? We all know it won't, of course. There's no such thing as werewolves, but what if? I like to put in that what if type of scenario.
And so, what were your main messages through asking what if?
Well, being in the real world, it's how would we real people react to this, so to speak? Um, like like in the first story, the first of the trilogy, there's a big investigation because everyone thinks that it's a bear killing everyone, that it's a serial killer, everyone. Once again, the thought of a werewolf, this fictional creature, never once enters people's minds. So it's like towards the end of the story, it's like this big shock to several of the characters. Throughout the story, you, the reader, know it. You know what's going on, but the characters in the story do not. So.
Yeah, so my question here, how do you select the topics for these horror novels? Like, do you read what the public would want to read about? Do you read the news? Do you get your ideas from the atmosphere and what's happening in the world? How do you get with these ideas?
Basically, like with the trilogy, Beast of 77 trilogy, I would, this is the funniest thing. I was actually watching a TV show one night, and it was like a psychological show or whatnot. And it just all of a sudden, this goes for all of my stories, all of a sudden just clicked inside of my head. What if this happened for real? You know? And I think that's the way it is with a lot of my stories. I wrote a story called actually my very first story, In the Country of Thieves and Ghosts. And that takes place in Australia. And basically what happens in that story is a young man and his girlfriend go to Australia for a religious retreat, and they end up encountering two demonically possessed boys who end up just destroying everything pretty much. So I think I got that particular idea from another maybe TV show or movie, so to speak. So it's like I'll hear something or watch something and then just, how can I improve upon that? How can I expand upon that? That just sounds amazing. Let me see what I can do if I take that one piece and move it on to there and just blow it up.
So, Sean, how do you take amazing ideas and turn them into amazing writings from your end?
You have to want to frighten your reader. You have to want to. If you're reading a horror story, if you're the reader and you're reading a horror story, a lot of times a horror story does not have to be graphic. It doesn't have to be bloody and gory. A lot of times it can be psychological. But if you're not frightening the heck out of your readers, it's not a horror story. So I want to put you, the reader, into this nightmare. I, you know, in the Beast of 77 trilogy, it is a graphic story. There's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore going on. But I want you, the reader, to feel this. Like in the first story, the main character, whose name is Isaac Mercer, he is the werewolf. He unfortunately murders some little girls. And after that, you, the reader, get the sense that, okay, if he's willing to do that to these little children, just imagine what he'll do to anyone else. And come to find out, Isaac also has a fiance and a young son. So it's after he kills these little girls, now anything can happen. So you, the reader, are sucked into, oh God, is he going to kill his own family next?
Yeah, and how would you exploit and manipulate the readers into like feeling these feelings you are spreading into your writing? How would you grasp their fear?
By basically like in the first story, I love the first story too, where the werewolf, he basically breaks in, just crashes into a home and just destroys his entire family of six, so to speak. So once again, being in this real world setting, you know, I put it into a context that everyone could relate to. Imagine this creature, this werewolf, down inside your basement or in your bedroom or in your bathroom, of all places. That's where the final encounter with the werewolf happens, inside a bathroom. And it's such a horroring type of scene, type of setting, that it could happen anywhere. It could happen during the daytime, not just at nighttime. In the following story, in the sequel story, The Curse of 1977, it happens in a sewer. It happens in a women's shelter. It happens inside of a school, any and everywhere. In the third and final story, it happens in a church, of all places, you know. So, you know, you have to let the reader know, like in this particular case, that this can happen to anyone at any time. If little children can be destroyed, if a church can be destroyed, if a family can be destroyed, I believe that's how you suck in a reader. Any and everyone is off limits. No one is off limits.
Yeah, sure. So my next question is, like, how much do you know about the human psychology to be able to grasp these feelings into your writing and into your novels?
Well, one of the things that I did in these novels is, once again, when you're fusing in the reality, the realism of it and whatnot, there's a lot of real dialogue in the stories. And I kind of got dinged by my publisher, but I tried to explain to them that in order to really get the reader to really feel what's going on, I have to put real dialogue in there. There's a situation with Isaac, who is the main character, where he's speaking about the death of his mother to his father. There's another situation where Isaac is he's talking to his fiance, and it's just a normal talk that you would have with your wife or girlfriend or whatever, whoever they are, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. It's a real conversation. And that's what I do with all of my stories. I try to infuse real conversations into not so real situations.
My next question is, do you think you have already written your most horrific horror novel scene, or is it still to come?
I think I already have. I think I already have. I did that. I actually did that in Beast of '77. The first one, where the little girls were killed. You know, and I love how I set that particular scene up as well. Basically, the werewolf crashes into the home, and I'll put it like this: imagine you have a dog, and you're upstairs in your bedroom, minding your business, and you hear the dog coming upstairs, and your bedroom door is closed, and you hear the dog sniffing and scratching at the bedroom door. And you're in your bedroom, the door closed, and you're sitting there wondering, what is that dog doing? What's going on out there? And all this is going on right before the dog explodes to the door and kills you. That's basically that scene right there. That's how the little girls are killed. It's a terrible scene, but I think it's probably the most frightening in all the stories.
Yeah, that is awesome. Now let's turn into your human, your kind side. Now you are writing in space inspirational writing. What is that about?
Well, I'm doing a trilogy of stories with this one right now. The first story was about two women. It's all about experiencing life's tragedies, life's ups and downs, so to speak. And with the first story, it's about two women, both of which have lost children, their children. And the second story, it's about two men. And it takes place in 1973. One young man comes home from the Vietnam War. Another young man can't seem to find a job. The third story is going to be about two young people in the 1980s. Um, One has a cousin who has HIV. Another one has an older brother who he's a murderer. So basically, all of these people who really don't have much of a relationship with Jesus, through these horrible situations, begin to reconcile with Jesus.
So my other question, how much do you study to be able to write your novels?
Um, well, there's a saying that says there's a difference between a web search and research. Um, I do a lot of research, meaning I go to the library, I read a lot of books, because a lot of the books have things that the web does not. So I'll go to the library. I love reading older books, older research books, so to speak. Like with my horror novels, I did a lot of research for the 1970s. There's a lot of things that you just can't find on Google. Google is a great search engine. It's a great learning tool, but nothing beats an actual physical book. I know for one of my stories, it takes place way back in the 1920s. You definitely need to go to a library and get a book on the 1920s. You will find it will just open your mind. Because at first, I didn't think too much of it. I thought I could look it all up on Google. But come to find out, when I started reading these books, Google did not put it in or clarify it in the same way the actual physical book did. So basically, I look at a lot of books in the library. I do a lot of research in the library, a lot of archival footage from the library.
That is awesome. And how much writing practice do you do to refine your writing style?
Well, at first, years ago, when I first started writing, I had no training whatsoever. I didn't go to any kind of schooling, anything like that. It was just something that I plied away at, kept trying, kept trying. I failed, kept trying, failed, kept trying. And eventually, it's anything. It's like riding a bike. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more I kept writing, the more I never gave up. It was just something that just came to me eventually. Obviously, I read other people's novels, other people's books, and, kind of got a style. And once I finally found a style that worked for me personally, I stuck with it, so to speak.
So my other question here, if you are going to introduce yourself to your audience, to your public, to the people who will pay to read your novels, what exactly unknown do you need these people to know about you? How can they relate to your character? What are your secrets? What is your mystery?
I don't know if there are any secrets, but I want people to know that the characters of my story, I'm not, me personally, and I'm not against other authors who do this, but for me personally, I love writing realistic characters. Even the characters in my Christian series are realistic people. I don't like writing stories about, a distant planet or a distant land or Middle Earth or anything like that. Those stories are fine. I'm not against them, but it's just not my style. I love realism. And I know realism in the real world is not what a lot of people like, but I think it's something that's become so ingrained in me. That's pretty much the only thing I know. I think a lot of people, when they read a more realistic story, they can get more into it. It automatically grabs them and they automatically think to themselves, well, this can happen to me. Just like in my horror stories, just like with the werewolf story, no, there's no such thing as werewolves, but just like the scenario I just mentioned about, dog coming upstairs, automatically you're sucked into that because that's something everyone can relate to. Having a pet, having a dog, and not knowing what's going to happen with this dog. Everyone has a dog that roams the house. So I love realism in my stories.
That is great. So, if my question even applies, like, does your writing or do your novels address certain messages to the public?
Well, the Christian novels do. As far as the horror novels, I'm not really into giving a message, a social message, so to speak, as I am trying to frighten people, trying to gross people out. With the horror stories, there's no kind of, political statement going on. It's just plain and simple horror or anything like that. There may be, the characters may be realistic, but the story, the message it's fictional. You know, I don't I don't really get all political or, you know, any kind of SJW type of, mannerisms, so to speak. Now with the Christian series, that's different. I want to write about Jesus, but with the horror stories, not at all.
So, my next question is, if you're going to choose one of your novels of all your writing and recommend it to the viewers, which book would you recommend and why?
Hmm. I would definitely have to say The Curse of 1977. Even though it's a sequel, it's the second part in the story. I have to say that particular story expanded on the entire trilogy. What you did not know in the first story, Beast of 77, you will definitely get to know in the sequel. A lot of questions are answered in that second story. A lot of the mystery is unfolded. More characters are introduced. There's a whole lot more horror in it as well. So I think it's a scarier story as well, so to speak, especially towards the end. Um, it's definitely a more shocking story as that. It's probably and it's also the longest story I've ever written as well. So I had a lot to say in that story.
It has been more than an inspirational talking to you, Shawn, and listening to your great ideas. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day ahead.
You the same. Bye bye now.